Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
I'm scared. I'm really
What?
scared right now.
What's that? What's wrong?
I've been told I needed to fear the turtle, so therefore, Ohio State will never be more proximate to turtles than they are during Maryland week. So therefore, it's a scary time.
Oh, and you are outside now, Tom. So just be careful. Look, watch out behind you.
Mm.
It's a good thing you're not by Mirror Lake.
Outside is where turtles live.
Exactly. So unless you have house turtles, which why would you? Unless you're Mike Tyson, all right? Because he has exotic animals as pets. For those of you who didn't know, but now you do. And yes, some turtles can be exotic.
How do they get up on the pole? I don't understand.
All right, Tom. Since this show is already,
Off the rails.
Yes, I want you to go on record right now. Who is the next head coach at Michigan, or no, rather, who is Michigan's head coach next year?
Does not Jim Harbaugh count as an answer, or
no?
No. I'm gonna say Matt Campbell, just because I don't think there's anyone that is a more than like 20% chance of happening, and he's probably about a 20% chance of happening. Jim Harbaugh is somewhere around that number two, probably, if they decide they can't scrape together the money, but it sure feels like not Jim Harbaugh is the correct answer there.
I agree. But as we've talked about with Matt Campbell, there's the Texas lure. So that's why I am going with Mario Cristobal.
Is Michigan a better job than Oregon? And I'm going to need you to show your work here.
Oregon coaches leave for other jobs. That's all I've got. Although, I guess not all of them, because we've already one Oregon coach did not leave for Ohio State way back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Chip Kelly left. Yeah, Chip Kelly left for the NFL. Willie Taggart left for his quote unquote dream job, which worked out great at Florida State. Mike Bellotti left for retirement, and that's
you make a great point.
That's it. Going back to about 1990. When did Bellotti get there? 1996, 1990, something like that. So, because Rich Brooks coached him in the Rose Bowl in '94. So left. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Michigan is a better job than Oregon right now. I think you've got great facilities. You've got the brand of Oregon is much better. They're recruiting just great there, and I'm not sure what Michigan offers Mario Cristobal that makes him want to leave.
Michigan is a Jordan school.
I've been told that matters a lot. The people who told me that it matters a lot have not had that borne out at all in the results in the areas where they thought it would matter a lot, but I've been told it matters a lot.
I just think that tie to Nike as a whole helps Michigan. Oregon does not have that.
No, that's true. It has helped Michigan a lot in the area of memes, where you can Photoshop that crying Jordan on their jerseys. That's been a really, really fruitful effect of that partnership. Yeah. Who is Oregon's uniform sponsor? I can't remember. Do they have?
I believe it's Champion or Puma.
Yeah, I only see them during night games, so did there. Sorry, just trying to fill time. See what the.
No, I agree. My thought of Mario Cristobal probably is not good because the recruiting is going well, and not that we need to talk about Michigan, in Oregon, but why would he leave when things are going well to a place where things have not gone well? So then, do you have to settle for somebody where things are going 7-5 every year, like Matt Campbell, or, as I always say, Jeff Hafley?
I would think that Jeff Hafley would be a fantastic hire for them, because what they have to do, and this is a sort of high risk, high reward thing where Jeff Hafley doesn't have a track record. If Jeff Hafley had a track record, he could probably get a job better than Michigan, because no matter what Michigan people think, there are probably at least 10 jobs in the country that are better than Michigan, maybe more than that. So you are. It's not the scratch and dent section necessarily, but you're not shopping at the absolute top of the market probably, because there are better positions open. There are going to be better jobs available this offseason, possibly 2 jobs better than Michigan available this offseason, depending on how things go in Austin and LA. But I think they need to do something different. Like, they need to hire someone who it's like, tell me your favorite Bo Schembechler story. And then the person kind of squints and goes, he was the guy with the Block M hat, right? And the kind of tinted glasses. Yeah. Yeah. Was he the one that threw a No, that was Bobby Knight. Like, that's what they need. Like, you need to go far, far, far away. And then you need to tell your boosters, go get your shine box and sit in the corner and leave this dude alone. Do not tell him, oh, this is how Bo used to do it. No one cares. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 30 years. Go away. Please continue writing checks, but go away for the time being and let this guy just do what he needs to do. Because they need energy. They need something different. Like, you can't just go, well, best available guy off the Bo coaching tree. Like, no. You have done some flavor of that outside of the Rich Rodriguez experiment, which they basically didn't give a chance to succeed. They have done some flavor of Bo Schembechler disciple all the way back to Gary Moeller. And it's like, yeah, it hasn't worked out great, but it has worked out very, very, very consistently.
Yeah, and it's been over a decade since they did the Rich Rodriguez thing, so it might be time again. And if what is your favorite Bo Schembechler story? And if somebody goes, you mean the president of the Detroit Tigers?
Oh,
I think that maybe that's a good answer, because there are any number of coaches who can get out of Michigan what Jim Harbaugh is doing right now. I think we would both agree. So, Tom, let's move on now to the subject of this podcast. Normally, the Ohio State football program. Today, we spoke with head coach Ryan Day, right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, cornerback Shaun Wade, wide receiver Garrett Wilson, and who else, Tom?
Nick Petit-Frere, Jonathon Cooper, Garrett Wilson, Shaun Wade, and Ryan Day.
Yes, Cooper. That was the fourth. I can't remember 5. It's 4 is the limit. I 4.5 years at Ohio State, a lot of drinking, Tom. That's one of the drawbacks. I can't go past 4 names. I can't remember them.
Maybe you were there for 5 years and not 4.5, but you wouldn't remember.
Couldn't even tell you because, yeah. But Tom, Ryan Day, what did he have to say today? What does he ever have to say? That's not an insulting thing. It's just he tries to give you a little, but if you ask certain questions, he's not going to give you anything, because he's not trying to let you know. I guess he's not trying to give you an answer that could cost him a game. And any answer, Tom, any given question could lose Ohio State a game based on his answers. So I have no problem with him being very, very secretive and being very close to the vest in terms of not giving us anything, because I don't want to cost anybody a loss.
I think that the way questions get answered during press conferences during the week is right in line with all of the media access we get during the season to practice, where, with as close as all of these games are within the Big Ten Conference for Ohio State, like, one person watching 1 minute of practice during the year, not just a COVID year, any year, could be enough to swing the balance of power in the Big Ten. I mean, it's right there. That is just how college football coaches operate. There is this complete paranoia this is not a Ryan Day thing. This is not just an Ohio State thing. This is everywhere. They just, Michigan's facility is known as Fort Schembechler because they don't let anyone in. It's just, and it's a national thing. Like, the people you think of when you think about media access are the rare exceptions where Pete Carroll is just like, yeah, come on in, watch whatever you want. I don't care. Watch me throw a dummy off a roof. I don't care. That is the extremely rare exception. Basically nothing good can happen for Ryan Day if he gives us wonderful, colorful answers during the course of the week. Like, we may find him more charming. That doesn't actually do him any good. So it's not really in his best interest to give us super interesting answers to every question. So I did think, though, right off the bat, it was like the first question was like, oh, that is kind of interesting. And then it was kind of all downhill from there. But it started off really interesting today.
And I think are you talking about the line of scrimmage and?
Well, just the line of scrimmage and then the follow up on needing balance. Yeah.
Well, and that was, as Tom said, one of the first questions he was asked about. There is not quite the balance yet. Ohio State is throwing for more than they're rushing, which honestly you should be doing, basically, because you want like 300 yards passing, 200 yards rushing, whereas Urban would say 250, 250. But they did rush for 200 yards last week against Rutgers, and they said his answer was to run for 200 yards. I don't know how much more we need to run than that. And I agree with him on the premise that 200 yards is plenty, not plenty, good enough, as he said. We have seen over the years where Ohio State does much better than that, and they generally do much better than that. But I think as long as you get over 200 yards, you've done what you've needed to do. In general, how they got to 200 yards against Rutgers may not get them to 200 yards against other teams. And that 200 yards, I believe, was 99 on 3 carries, including the 38-yard fake punt for Steel Chambers. And then on the other 30-some carries, they gained, 100 and some yards, averaging like 3 yards a carry. Again, when you have Justin Fields, the running game doesn't have to be like it was in 2013 with Braxton Miller, Carlos Hyde, where like the entire team is averaging nearly 8 yards a carry or some crazy number. Just staying ahead of the chains, as we talk about so much with this passing game, that's really all you need to do. And Day was kind of, I don't want to say took offense to it, but was just kind of matter of fact. Hey, man, 200 yards is all we need. And we got the win. It was, 35-9 in the fourth quarter. What else? 42-9 maybe to start the fourth quarter. Really, what else do you need from this team? They got their 200 yards. A lot of that coming when, Rutgers kind of is just waiting for the run, as Ohio State is just trying to play out the string, get the game over. And so those are the tough yards. And he seemed to be pretty okay with the running game, and that's kind of how he's been all season.
Yeah, and I think they haven't necessarily seen anything that's like, this is definitely going to kill their chances to win in the college football playoff. I think there's stuff that's a concern. I mean, you look at Trey Sermon and Master Teague, and Sermon had the 36-yarder where he got hurt right, very towards the end of the game. Teague had a 25-yarder. You take those two out, and they are averaging 3.4 yards per carry. Like, that's not great. You need to be doing a little more than that on the ground. And those average numbers were, at the end of the day, you look at the final average numbers, and it's Sermon 5.7, Teague 5.0, and it looks, that looks okay. But when it's skewed by one long one, that kind of, then it's a little bit more of a concern, I think. They have to be able to be more efficient, I think, in the run game. They have to have more 4s and 5s and just have a lot fewer of the stop for no gain, stop for 1 yard. They've got to be able to hit 5 yards pretty consistently. And that's not against the lower level competition they're facing this year. That's not necessarily going to be, undoable. That's not an impossible ask. I had Ross Fulton on the morning show on Tuesday, and he talked about some of the schematic stuff that they're doing, and a lot of it is, the fact that they're not running Justin Fields takes away, the inside zone they like to run. That takes away the threat of the quarterback. So then that defensive end can just come crashing down, and then it's like, well, if you don't, if you don't have that quarterback threat, that then it's just an inside handoff that everyone knows is an inside handoff. And the one, as Ross pointed out, the one time Justin Fields pulled the ball, he basically walked into the end zone, and it reminds me a lot of that 2018 TCU game where Dwayne Haskins had just been handing off, and then Dwayne Haskins, who did not move quite as well as Justin Fields, there I said it out loud, we were all thinking it, pulled it once and just absolutely walked in from like 5 yards out. And it's there if they want it to be. It just, and it's there when they need it. They haven't felt like they needed it the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and I get the sense from Day that he feels like if we're rushing for 200 yards and Justin Fields is very little part of it, that's fine, because I know when I need it, I can add Justin Fields into the running game, and then they go from right now they're averaging 4.8 yards per carry on the season to 6 or something like that. Because when you add in that, Fields is just as likely to go 40 yards as any of these guys if you give him the option to keep it. And just the having that option to keep it changes what defenses do. We saw that in 2018 when they just keyed in on J.K. Dobbins relentlessly. I also think when they do finally allow Justin Fields to run the ball, and right now, maybe it'll happen against Maryland. I think at this point, they seem like they needed it against Nebraska because the running game was really bad initially. But if they lose Justin Fields, forget it, basically. Like, they need him. And so if the running game looks ugly and you win, but then he is there in January to run the ball 15 times a game and you win a national title, the season worked perfectly. I mean, you can take some ugly running games as long as you get the win and then you make the playoffs and then you do what you want. Now, getting back to Sermon and Teague, I'm just looking at their numbers. I think they both carried the ball 12 times against Rutgers. And for Sermon, 7 of his carries went for 2 yards or less. 7 of Teague's carries went for 3 yards or less. And so that means, they've got the 4 longest carries for Sermon were 4, 5, 12, 12, and 36. For Teague, 4, 5, 9, 9, 25. And when you've got more carries for 1, 2, 3, like less than 3 yards or 3 yards or less than you do 3 yards or more, that's not good. And I know when there was a post on the board discussing Ohio State's running game, and the efficiency is actually better than it was last year. But when you pick up 2 yards or less on most of your carries, or 3 yards or less on most of your carries, you need 4 downs to like pick up a 4th down if you're just going to run it every time. And that's not good. And I'm not saying they need Carlos Hyde in the 2013, but when you have so many negative plays, that puts so much pressure on your quarterback and your passing game. And now, Tom, I know it's absolutely beautiful in Ohio right now. It's like 75 degrees this week. And, if we could keep this all season long, then there would be a concern. But at some point, the weather is going to turn, and you're going to need that running game. And the running backs are going to need to do it with that offensive line. And, of course, we can also discuss the troubles on the interior. But maybe it's not all on the running backs. There's the interior. There's no reading from Fields. There is the fact that you still have 2 guys coming back from injury. I think all of this is contributing, and it's not all just on the running backs, but they also, Tom, need to play better.
Yeah, it is definitely not all on the running backs. I mean, this is one of these things where I think it's easy to look at it and go, oh, well, the running backs aren't very good because they're not picking up more than 2 yards on most carries. Like, well, there's a bunch of other stuff that goes into it too. So that's definitely worth. I mean, you went through a lot of it right there, and I spent 20 minutes talking to Ross Fulton about it for the morning show on Tuesday. So you can listen to that. That's the Morning Scoop episode, the Tuesday Chalk Talk episode with Ross. That is, if you want to get a little bit more specifics and some more deep dive into that, you can find that there. But I mean, to your point, Big Ten weather is coming. Yeah, it is 75 degrees right now. But I mean, I looked in my phone today, and there was a 2 years ago today in my photo memory. And do you remember where we were 2 years ago today?
No, I don't.
Freezing our butts off in
Michigan
East
State?
Lansing, Michigan. Yes.
That was
one
bad,
of the
man.
coldest games I have ever been at. And it snowed that morning, and it was so cold, and no one could throw the ball. And it was just a real ugly, sloppy punt fest. And that was the game where Drew Chrisman got interviewed on the field on National Network TV after the game because he was the player of the game because it was a punter. That's coming, man. And it is not going to be any warmer in East Lansing in a month from now. They're going to East Lansing in 1 month and 2 days. So it's not going to get warmer up in East Lansing. when it's December, and it's not going to be less windy in Champaign on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I mean, there are some cold games coming up, and it's going to be chilly, and they're going to have to. This is one of these things that we note every year, that you have the Ohio State quarterbacks on pace for these incredible numbers, and then they tail off later in the year, and it's like, well, why did that happen? Well, it turns out it's not as nice to throw the football 40 yards downfield when it's 20 degrees as it is when it's 80 degrees. So, and that's probably a little bit less of a concern this year just because of Fields' arm strength. That's not as much of a concern with the wind and that kind of stuff. But still, like it was something Garrett Wilson talked about on Tuesday, that they know they have to work harder and harder just to stay at the production level they're at right now, because number one, teams have more film on them, so they can be a little bit more prepared. But number two, that weather's coming, and when that weather comes, everything is a little harder to do.
I also think in that film preparation, Ohio State only shows as much as they need for each game, and then they add in more. The good news for Ohio State, you talked about those 2 road games, is that it is just Illinois and Michigan State. And I know Michigan State beat Michigan, which is a great win, but that may be their only win this season, and it may in fact be their only close game, but it really wasn't that close. So
that's the absolute funniest way Michigan State could finish this season is a completely disheartening win over Michigan, and then just like, okay, wrap it up. See you guys next year. We're done.
And
Bye, everybody.
They would sell crazy amounts of T-shirts because it would be like the perfect season, really. Just the one win. Trey Sermon left the game after, I guess, like basically hitting his head after his long run or whatever there happened there on his rough landing. They said I think he expects him to practice, but they'll see how it goes and they'll watch him, which was, they plan on having him available for practice. They'll see how things go, which was about as open as Day gets regarding injuries, but seems like he'll be okay, which will, just help him get back into the swing of things and continue to do that. Blake Hallbill, see how it goes this week. Day was happy with Jake Seibert's debut, but he wasn't challenged. It was just extra points. And well, you know what? You had opportunities to kick field goals, but you kept going for touchdowns. So that's kind of on you, Day. Just put that out there. Nicholas Petit-Frere, mentioned as one of the top most improved players on the team. We talked to him today. And we can still finish up with Day here in a little bit. I'm always impressed when we get to talk to Nicholas, because he is just a really smart, thoughtful guy. And the thing is, he's been that way since the first time we ever talked to him. Like, I don't know that we got to talk to him as a freshman. I think maybe last year may have been the first time we got to talk to him. But like, you can ask him, what's your favorite color? And he'll just go on about, why this is my favorite color, what it means to me, what it has meant to his family, that this has been his favorite color, and how he reflects on this favorite color day by day, and how it drives him. And he's an interesting guy, and a guy who, this is his third year, 5-star, number 1 offensive tackle in the country. Gosh darn it, why aren't you starting from day one? Well, it's because he came to Ohio State at 265 pounds. So just relax a little bit.
Well, and he's got a little bit of a philosopher in him, it feels like. And that's true of several of the offensive linemen. The offensive linemen are always the best interviews on the team. That's just very consistent, and which tells me that Robert Landers was an offensive lineman at heart. But yeah, I mean, you go through Harry Miller, you go through Wyatt Davis is always a great interview. Josh Myers is always a great interview. Like, it's always, those guys are always just fun to talk to. But he talked about the fact that, like, everyone has a different journey, and that, he was asked, well, Thayer Munford was a 3-star guy, came in, was second year in the program, was just immediately just on the field and an impact player. And then Nick Petit-Frere came in, and he was a 5-star guy and like a top 10 or borderline top 10 prospect in the nation overall. And it took him a couple of years to get on the field. And, it's just basically like everyone has a different journey. And like you mentioned, the weight thing that he had to, come in at 265, that is not Big Ten tackle size. Sorry. That, that also explains the video that we saw 2 camps ago where Alex Williams is just bull rushes Nick Petit-Frere and just bowls him over. And it was like, wow, is Alex Williams like a breakout star this year? Like, oh no, turns out Nick Petit-Frere weighed 265 pounds, and that's not a Big Ten tackle size. So there you go. There's the answer to that. But no, he talked about, all the stuff you have to learn, and you've got to watch a lot of film, and you've got to, it is not an easy spot to get on the field. And that's one of the things we've talked about a lot with freshmen is, hey, you can see a wide receiver, you can see a running back on the field as a true freshman. That is a hard spot to be on the field as a true freshman. So it takes a little while, but it has gotten there, and it has gotten there both slower than I thought it might have on a sort of like broad scale. Like I thought he might be an impact player last year to some degree. And then this year coming into the year, it was like, well, I guess we'll see how he does. And it's just like immediately like, oh, he's really, really good. And he's getting featured on all these, like national college football film analysis kind of accounts. Like, oh, look at how incredible the Ohio State tackles have been. They've only allowed one quarterback pressure in 3 games combined.
He's kind of like the random Iowa dude who is a 2-star tight end or whatever. And it takes a couple of years to build him up from this 260-pound person into this 315-pound Tristan Wirfs or something. I'm not saying that's how he got started, but just the development of this, and it's been interesting to watch. Getting back to Ryan Day, he was asked about Marcus Hooker. How is he playing? The fact that he's not Jordan Fuller, and basically didn't want to. Obviously, he's not going to throw him under the bus. Needs to play better. That guy needs to be the ultimate eraser, I think, is what he said. And right now, that's not Marcus Hooker. I think he missed. I counted 4, just easy to count missed tackles. That the first one I noticed, I'm like, well, I better start charting this. I don't know if I missed any before that, but when we talked to Hooker last week or the week before, he just was talking about how he has to get out of his own head, and he's still thinking, and this is not a good week for any of that thinking to be taking place. Like, he's got to be on his game. He has to be completely as close to Jordan Fuller as you can, because just watching the Maryland Penn State game where Raheem Jarrett had 2 long touchdowns, just a simple, like maybe a little post, little slant over the middle in route, and the one safety wasn't able to get to him, and he just took off. And so safety is going to be key in this game, and he needs to start playing much, much better. And at some point, because I think I wrote in on the forum yesterday or the day before, first of all, he needs to change his number because he's wearing Justin Wintz's number right now, and you don't want that as a safety. Like, you need a fresh start. You need to find a different number, and because the way he's playing right now is starting to remind me of Justin Wentz and the struggles that he had. And I'm not saying the number would change everything. Clearly it wouldn't. But this is an area of concern. Before the season, I thought defensive tackles were the biggest concern. That is less of a concern, if no concern at this point. And right now, I know people are concerned about the corners. For me, it's the free safety, Marcus Hooker, right now.
Yeah, and I mean, those are somewhat related issues because they've been playing Josh Proctor, who might be, maybe Josh Proctor is the best deep safety, but they've been playing him, kind of subbing him in and out with Marcus Williamson a little bit of that slot corner spot. And, maybe Josh Proctor needs to be that deep safety if they have more confidence in him to be to be the eraser, as Ryan Day said, and to be the kind of more sure tackler. It's a spot where it doesn't, this is not something that happens every play, but a mistake there, a mistake from a defensive end can cost you a first down. A mistake by a safety costs you 6. Like, a lot of times a mistake by a safety will cost you 6 points, and they can't afford that. I mean, I was just scrolling through the timeline to try and figure out who talked about the fact that Maryland has really good yards after catch out of their receivers. I don't know if it was Shaun Wade or Jonathon Cooper, but they talked about the fact that guys like Raheem Jarrett and a lot of those other talented wide receivers, they have guys who can not just make the catch, but also make you miss. And if they can tackle those guys after the catch, you give up 8 yards, you give up 12 yards, whatever it is. That's fine. You can live with that. You can't live with miss the tackle and then the 12-yard play turns into a 50-yard play like that. You can't do that. That's how you end up giving up 51 points to Maryland, like they did the last time they were there. And we didn't hear this specifically, but I'm pretty sure they don't want to do that.
No, especially since they don't really play. The Ohio State doesn't really play offense in the fourth quarter, so that would be a concern. One of the things that we've talked about on the show, and one of my pet theories, was that Ohio State needs to try to sign a backup quarterback as a second quarterback, not necessarily a backup quarterback, an Ohio quarterback who would be willing to stick around for 5 years and maybe be that backup. And so Day was asked about that. First, he was asked, do you worry about signing 5-star quarterbacks in back-to-back classes? And no, because you want competitors, and if they're not competitors and they leave, then you didn't need them anyway. But he did say they have talked about signing a quarterback specifically to be a backup. But if you sign a guy who is happy to be a backup, he's probably never going to make it anyway. And I can understand that. I that doesn't stop me from continuing to believe that, hey, maybe this 3-star Ohio kid might be a guy that you bring in to see what he can do, not because you want him to be a backup, but it does help your depth, and there is some potential there. And we know Ohio players are slow, late bloomers, if you will. So I still think that's an avenue for them to examine. But but he clearly answered that no, we don't want backups unless, Tom, of course, they are graduate transfers.
Yeah, and that's been a way that they've kind of gotten around that, where, yes, it would be great if you could bring in someone and just have someone who's there for 4 years and just sort of someone who knows the system, and you can kind of plug and play, so you don't get into the situation they were in before Justin Fields showed up, where it was like, the quarterback room looks like, they at one point had Justin Fields and Matthew Baldwin then transferred, and then they had Chris Chugunov, who was one of the grad transfers, and they had Gunnar Hoke, who was the other grad transfer. It was like, that's not great. That's not what you're looking for. And here's the other thing. Sometimes those 3-star guys, the 3-star, second quarterback in the class turn out okay. You know who's one of those? Gentleman named Mac Jones at Alabama in 2017. That has turned out okay. I would love to tell you exactly how okay it has turned out, except my internet's running a little slowly right now. So you'll just have to take my word for it that Mac Jones has turned out okay and might be in the Heisman conversation with Justin Fields. Yes. So you're not limited, but he was in the same class as Tua. Tua was the 5-star, number 32 overall player in the class, number 1 dual threat quarterback. And then you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the class, and it's like, oh, Mac Jones from the Bowl School in Jacksonville, Florida, number 399 overall, number 18 pro style quarterback. And it's turning out okay. And, he was a 6'2", 180 pound player, but that was 3 years ago. So yeah, you never quite know what you're going to get with quarterbacks. And if you find the right one who's the second guy in the class, great. But I think right now I would not do a lot of questioning of Ryan Day's quarterback recruiting, because it seems like it's working out just fine.
No, we're going to question it. But another, I thought the second guy you're going with, the name you're going with, is going to be Troy Smith, who was the second quarterback in the 02 class. The one I'm going to go with, Austin Mockerman. Him and David Priestley.
Was he really the second one? Weren't they both really the first quarterback in the class?
I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, Joe Germain was kind of the second quarterback in his class with
Mark Garcia. Was that? Well, they were both JUCOs. Were they the same class? I don't remember.
I think they might have been, but
it was a very long time ago, so nobody can tell us we are wrong. Day was asked, is Maryland the best team Ohio State will have played so far? And he said it's a week to week thing right now. But Tom, if Penn State was the best team, or maybe was Nebraska the best team, or maybe was Rutgers, I would think that yes, Maryland is the best team, but Maryland was really bad in week 1 and had a bad defense in week 2. They kind of put everything together this past week against Penn State. I don't know who the best team. I'm going to assume Penn State is the best team Ohio State has played so far, but I'm not convinced of that, because I seen them last week against Maryland and they was not good.
Yeah, and I thought Day's answer to that question was really good and really the correct answer. Like, sometimes you get the answer that's like, oh, we want to respect all of our opponents and we Like, no, this is the year when, like, yeah, it kind of depends on the week is the actual correct answer, because you look week to week, and Michigan State lost to Rutgers week 1, turned the ball over 7 times, then beat Michigan in Ann Arbor, and then went out and just got absolutely ham blasted by Iowa. And Iowa has had, we've talked about the cultural issues at Iowa. Iowa was 0-2. Iowa has had 4 different players enter the transfer portal in the last couple weeks. I mean, it is like Iowa is like bad, bad, bad. Like all the bad mojo you can have around a program is all going on at Iowa. And that game was what, 42-0 or something against Michigan State at one point. Like there is no explanation. Like this is one of these years where if you are a serious college football gambler, like my hat's off to you, sir or ma'am. Like best of luck to you, because look at the standings. I posted the standings after I got home from the game on Saturday night. I pulled up the Big Ten standings, and it's like, outside of Ohio State being at the top, it's like this is more or less the reverse of what you would have expected. Like Indiana is at the tippy top because of alphabetical order, but then Ohio State, and then you go down, and it's like, who are the 2 bottom schools in the Big Ten East? Well, certainly Maryland Maryland or Rutgers or Michigan State. Like, nope, Michigan and Penn State. Sure, just as we all expected.
Before we talked today, we had an opportunity to speak with men's hockey coach Steve Rolick, and I wanted to be like, I hope you are ready for some crazy crap this year, because just based on watching football, it's going to be insane, and good luck, sir. But instead, I just asked him about the difficulties of it. One last thing about Day, I asked him how quickly Legend Cavazos, when he does come back, how quickly would he be able to contribute? And yeah, too many unknowns, he said. And yet he keeps talking about him like, when they get him back, we can use him. So I'm like, well, how likely is that? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it just, you hear him talk about him, and the way he's talking about him, it's like there's no question in his mind that he will be back at some point this year. Now, is that this week? Probably not. Is it next week? I don't know. Is it the week after that? Maybe. Is it the week after that? Possibly. Like it, but he doesn't talk about him like someone who's going to be out all year, which is good. I mean, they need, I don't know how far behind he is. I mean, he came in for the spring and then, had the 4 spring practices. And I would assume being around this summer probably did a lot of good for him, because they've talked about how the 7-on-7 that they were able to run during the summer, it might be one of the reasons why the passing games are ahead of the running games in a lot of spots in college football right now. That may also be why the passing, that could also be on the other side of the ball, where maybe the passing defenses are a little bit more practiced, to have a few more reps than the guys who are kind of in the trenches and trying to, the Mike backer or the defensive tackles who are trying to get a good push. Like, they just haven't had that many reps because they haven't been able to do that kind of stuff because of the COVID restrictions over the summer. So, maybe he was able to make up some ground over the summer with those 7-on-7 times. But, it's always a concern throwing a true freshman corner in the game. They probably are going to have to at some point this year, and it sounds like they know they're going to have to. Ryan Watts was pretty impressive, I thought, on Saturday. I mean, again, like, the bar for true freshman corner on the field in game 3 is like, don't fall down and have someone spike a football on your head in the end zone. Like, that's about the bar for a true freshman corner in his 3rd game, but he didn't do that. Like, it looked okay. And if they can get him, or they can get something out of Tyreek Johnson, someone else outside of kind of the top 3 guys at the corner spot, like, if they can get something else from some of those guys, that'll go a long way later in the year.
And as I mentioned, we talked to Nicholas Petit-Frere, and one of the things he kept emphasizing on why he is better is, one, obviously getting up to the weight needed and the strength needed was necessary, but his confidence level right now has him prepared for anything. And man, he is so good right now. Him and Thayer Munford, we thought they were the question marks of this offensive line coming into the season, and the interior was that. Don't worry, they'll be fine. There's almost no reason to talk about them because they're going to be outstanding. And then time you look, Rutgers, the champions from the offensive line were Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Frere. Petit-Frere being the co-player of offensive player of the game. Wyatt Davis had some issues. Josh Myers gave up. He's had some struggles in pass protection. And like the second holding from Harry Miller, he gets beat. And then he just grabs onto the neck of the guy like, come on, let's just go. And I don't know how you think that that's not going to get seen. And I know when you were talking with Kirk on the Morning Scoop, I believe on Monday, he's like, once they start to get away from you, you just got to let them go. And that's something that Harry Miller isn't doing yet. Petit-Frere said that I think he said he has no concerns about Harry. Harry's going to be fine. And I don't think anybody does, but it's been interesting it'll be interesting to watch the journey of Harry Miller struggling to becoming great, kind of as we did with Nicholas Petit-Frere, who was basically put in the game against Northwestern, got the start, and was pretty bad really early. And then they had to go to, I think, bring Thayer Munford back in, or however they fixed it. I don't even remember, but they had to get him out of the game because it was rough. And that was his second year. This is Harry Miller's second year. These are two guys who came in as the top players at their respective positions. And it just doesn't happen right away. And that was one of the things Nick was saying. Everybody has their own journey. The opposite journeys for him and Thayer Munford are interesting, where Thayer Munford being this low-ranked guy who just comes out of nowhere basically and starts as a sophomore, to Petit-Frere, who was battling last year with Brandon Bowen to be the right tackle, and it didn't happen. You're like, well, it doesn't happen in year two. Is it ever going to happen for this guy? And as you said, like, it almost has immediately clicked. Like, once the calendar changed or once the season changed, it changed for him, and it's been good to see. But yeah, I think Harry Miller will get there. Maybe it takes until December.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's like, well, they're practically in the middle of the season. It's like, well, also they're 3 games in. It's like in a normal year, they would not have played a conference game yet. So you can't read too much into it. And, he's not there. I think that is probably a fair and almost inarguable statement at this point. He's not there yet, Harry Miller. But I think part of the expectation being out of whack is on people like us who talked about, based on what we're hearing from coaches, like he's one of the most focused and one of the most driven, and he's always in the film room, and he's it seemed like that was like a given that he was going to be the guy who was the starter, and then he won the job, and it was like, okay, well, we all know he's fantastic. It's like, well, we haven't actually seen him play a meaningful snap yet, so we probably should have done more break pumping earlier in the year, and so part of that is on us. But he's someone who's going to get there, and that's, I think we might have talked about this on the post game show Saturday night, but you go back to like Billy Price 2014, you go back to Kirk Barton, when Kirk Barton first started. Kirk Barton has basically said, like, yeah, I wasn't ready, and then all of a sudden, ta-da, All-American. Like, that doesn't, it's a little early to be writing people off completely right now, but he'll get there. And as you said, it could be a matter of a few weeks. I mean, let's go back to Billy Price in 2014. Billy Price against Virginia Tech was bad, like bad against Virginia Tech. And then by the end of the year, all of a sudden, like, oh, hey, look, they're running the ball behind Billy Price and winning a national championship. How about that? Like, you can get there. A season is relatively long. You can do a lot of development. And in terms of the increase in number of snaps and reps you've had over the course of a year, like, yeah, he's going to have 3 times as many reps by the time they get to the college football playoff as he does right now. And for someone who is as much of a student of the game as Harry Miller is, he's probably going to make the most of those and be able to learn a lot, from each one of those reps and each one of those weeks and all those film study sessions. And so, who he is right now is probably not who he's going to be by the time they're playing a game that's against a Clemson or an Alabama or an Oregon or Cincinnati or BYU or Texas A&M, whoever that ends up being.
Now, in defense of Billy Price in that game, Virginia Tech cheated by playing a defensive front that was heretofore unknown to mankind. Nobody had ever seen this. And so what if they had names for it? That doesn't mean it was a known defense. And so you can't put it all on him, Tom. And I agree, you are partly to blame for all of the expectations you have put on Harry Miller. So I'm glad that you're taking responsibility for that. Although by saying it doesn't mean you're taking responsibility. You still have to act on it. You can't just say something and then be done with it. You really do need to go around and apologize to people.
I thought I threaded the needle with one of those non-apologies apologies, like, oh, I'm sorry if you were offended. Like, I'm sorry if you were, I'm sorry if you feel misled by what we said about Harry Miller earlier in the summer. Yes. Yeah. I mean, he'll get there. Like, if you were on the field starting as a second-year player at Ohio State on the offensive line, you are going to get there. Period. End of sentence. Like, this is the trajectory that gets you to be an All-American and a first-round draft pick a couple of years from now. He's not there yet. It's not, this is a journey, as Nick Petit-Frere said. Everyone has their own journey, and he will get there. If it's the guys who are in their fourth year that haven't really made a serious push for playing time. Those are the guys who are like, okay, it may not happen for you. It can, but it may not. A guy who is starting as a guy in his sophomore year, that it'll happen for him. He'll get there. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Just little bit of patience may be required.
If he struggles this week, yes or no, he should be cut.
They won't have to cut him for numbers reasons. Ryan Day thought they would be fine at 85 next year. So maybe they keep him on as an active charity if he doesn't grade out a champion one more week. But 2 weeks against Indiana. I mean, I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but yeah.
Yeah, he's just a guy you keep around for the GPA. Totally. Yeah, I get that.
Look, we have a mechanical engineering major on our team.
And he's on scholarship. He's not just one of these smart walk-ons. Jonathon Cooper asked about the lack of sacks, but as he said, it's something we've said, they're still getting pressure. As long as that quarterback is uncomfortable, you're kind of doing your job. Getting the sack as the cherry on top, but just moving him around, keeping his eyes moving, looking. If he's looking over his shoulder, he's not looking at the routes. If he's feeling pressure when there's none there, then you have kind of won that battle. And so, yeah, he was happy with the pressure. And there was like Tyreek Smith, God bless him, so close to making plays at times. It just he comes around the corner, he slips and falls, and the quarterback is right in front of him, and he trips or he falls. Tyler Friday got there once or twice as well. Those guys are really, really close to being really, really good. And again, they both played last year. They both started a handful of games, but this is an opportunity for them to just take over this defense basically, because it all starts up front. We've seen Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett, and he has some plays in the Rutgers game where he just bursts through the line, blows everything up, and so there's times where he would beat the offense to where they're going, and it was almost there too early, which as a defensive tackle, it's strange where you get somewhere too early, and then the play, you almost overrun the play basically. And it wasn't a screen. It was just, he went too far, too fast, all gas, no brakes. But with these defensive ends, they are getting pressure. Teams are throwing the ball quickly, as they tend to do against Ohio State this week. A bunch of good receivers, a quarterback who is making good decisions. The game may be won by the defensive ends at Ohio State and the defensive tackles, the defensive line as a whole, because they want to keep him in the pocket. And if he's in the pocket, you've got two good penetrators in Haskell Garrett and Tommy Togiai right there to swallow him up.
Yeah, it's one of the things where one of the things that made the defensive backfield look so good last year was the fact that they didn't have to cover for 5 seconds. If the defensive line can get to Taulia Tagovailoa this weekend and keep him in the pocket, that removes, one of the things that makes him dangerous is if he gets out and is mobile and kind of on the run and it turns into a scramble drill. If they can keep him in the pocket, that eliminates that. If they can get some pressure and keep him, not have their defensive backs have to cover for 5 seconds, 6 seconds, then that makes a big difference as well. And Jonathon Cooper said, they watch when they're looking at film, they watch to see how quickly they get to the quarterback and affect him. Even if they don't sack him, if they're affecting him, that's a win. Because you are not going to sack the quarterback every time, because of course there's things that a quarterback can do to avoid, even if you're getting to the quarterback in 2.5 seconds, the quarterback can get rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds, and then ta-da, you don't have a sack. But you've severely limited what the offense can do during that time. Like, that cuts the potential number of routes they can run and concepts they can run. That cuts that list way, way, way down. I mean, look at how much Ohio State's doing, and we've talked a lot today about how deep Ohio State is going in their playbook. A lot of what Ohio State's doing to go deep in their playbook is stuff that takes a while to run, and longer developing routes and things going downfield. You remove all of that from the opposing team's playbook if they have to get rid of the ball in 2 seconds every time. That's just you're running a bunch of quick hitters, you're running a bunch of short passes and kind of short inside receiver crossing routes and that kind of stuff. And then if you're running a bunch of short stuff and there's constantly throwing short of the sticks and you're making good tackles, which again, this goes back to something we talked about earlier, they have to tackle better. But if they're getting good pressure up front and forcing Maryland and whoever else they're going to play later in the year into shorter throws, and you're tackling well, that's when it's 3rd and 8 and they throw a 6-yard pass and you make a tackle and then you get off the field. And, and then everyone goes, well, why are they not throwing, why are you not running the route past the sticks? Well, they don't have time to do that. So, it all kind of works together. It's not all, it's not quite as simple as you would probably want to, well, why aren't they getting sacks? Like they're not doing their jobs. Like, well, a little more goes into it than that.
Yeah. We talked to Garrett Wilson, who I have a bone to pick with. He was asked, the first thing he was asked about was Chris Olave. And Wilson said, Olave is so consistent. He's never had a bad practice and he never drops anything. Tom, let's go back to Justin Fields' first incompletion this season, which was a Chris Olave drop. So my question to you, do you really want a starting receiver in Garrett Wilson, who is also a liar?
Yeah. What areas does Garrett Wilson need to improve his game?
Truth-telling.
Truthfulness. Yes.
That's it. Yeah. He does everything else just perfectly. He could just stand to tell the truth a little bit more.
Yeah. He was, this is one of the stats that came up during the call with him was 4 Ohio State receivers have had 3 consecutive 100-yard games in the history of the school. So 3 consecutive 100-yard games. Stop me if you've heard of any of these guys before. Chris Carter, Terry Glenn, David Boston, Garrett Wilson. Any of those names sound at all familiar?
So I don't know if that information was in the game notes, but I was doing my own research. Like I texted Jerry Emig. I'm like, hey, is Garrett Wilson like the first since David Boston? Because I just assumed Boston did it. And of course I got no response. Jerry's very busy. I understand that. And so then I had to go digging through all of the box scores, and Boston did it twice in 98. Ted Ginn, I believe, did it once in not in the same season, like the last 2 games, and then maybe the first game of 2006 and the last 2 games of 2005. Maybe, I'm not sure about that, but I did the research and I did it, but it was hours ago, Tom. Who's to say what exactly ended up? But yeah, David Boston, several guys have done it twice. But KJ Hill, I think, was maybe the last until, Chris Olave has done it this year as well. But it's a pretty substantial company, and he could be the first to ever do it 4 times, maybe. I haven't gone back to look at Chris Carter or any of those guys. I know Boston only, like I said, Boston only did it 3 times. What do you got?
Well, in my research, while you're messing around and just talking and wasting everyone's time, I've been researching mostly by opening the Ohio State Game Notes PDF, which I will write a piece about later in the week. School record for most consecutive 100 yards games is 5, achieved by Chris Carter in 1986 against Purdue, Minnesota, Iowa, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. And if you remember anything about the Big Ten in the mid-1980s, Purdue, Minnesota, Iowa, Northwestern, and Wisconsin was not exactly murderer's row. That was Iowa was pretty good at that point. Purdue was like okay-ish maybe, but Minnesota, Northwestern, and Wisconsin was yeesh. That was not great. So yeah, that is a good note from at Buckeye Notes there. That's good job, Jerry, and good job, Mike Bassford. I'm sure whoever dug that up, 2 thumbs up on that stat.
Maybe an intern.
Probably.
Oh, terrible, Tom. Wilson was asked about playing so much and then comparing it to the running backs who need carries to get into the groove. And he said the same thing. Like the more you're on the field, the more you feel your groove. But he also understands the need for breaks and the need to get the younger guys in there. And when you have Jackson Smith and Jigba behind him, Although we saw quite a bit of those two playing together on Saturday with like Olave and Jamison Williams on the outside, and those two guys in the slot. And they all move around. Like they'll both be on the outside as well. And it's fun to watch just wherever these guys are moving around, because then they'll also move around within their routes. And Ross was talking about the switch concepts and all of the things to make life even more difficult for the defenses. Going back to Ryan Day real quick, when he was asked about recruiting 5-star quarterbacks, he's like, we have the best passing offense and the best passing game in college football. Why would you not want to be here? And you hear other people talking about Ryan Day being one of, if not the best quarterbacks coach in college football. And Tom, I'm just going to go out on a limb. I think the quarterback recruiting is going to continue to do well at Ohio State. Maybe even pretty good this month.
You think they might add a 5-star quarterback this month? Come on, what are the odds of that happening? I'm not sure I buy it. We'll see.
Who's to say? We talked to Shaun Wade today, Tom, and a lot of talk about, hey man, why aren't you playing so good? But with better English than I just used. And I think the best answer maybe of the day is, and I think I did quote it here, but the gist of it was, yeah, here you go. At the end of the day, you just want to win. So if I played bad and we win a natty, I'm going to be happy. And that is like the best answer of the day. That's the attitude you want. But let's not pretend that he's happy playing, giving up catches. And he did say that after watching the last 2 weeks, he's been greedy, trying to come down with interceptions rather than just knocking the pass down. The touchdown he gave up to the Rutgers tight end, for instance, he went and looked back and saw what he could have done differently. And really that's the key to all of this is they look at the passes they give up. Some of it is just scheme. Like when you're playing 10 yards off a guy, you're going to give up a slant, and that's, you can only trigger so much on that. And some of that is just, that's on the coaches, and they want to keep stuff in front of them because, I don't know, they're up by 34 points or something like that. Wow.
Yeah,
coaches have done worse things than that.
Yes. No, and I mean, talking about playing 10 yards off a slant, it's like, yeah, you're going to give that up. And if you do try and trigger real hard on that, then you get, then they run some kind of a double move. And then, I mean, that's something that happened in Michigan against Michigan State in a couple weeks ago, where they were getting torched when they were playing press man because you were getting guys behind them. So then they played off. Well, then they were hitting a bunch of real short ones. So then they get real aggressive on trying to hit the short ones, and they get hit with a double move and you get hit for another deep one. It's just, you kind of have to pick your poison to a certain degree. And, and I think Shaun Wade is probably plenty comfortable being in press coverage during, when they have to be. But, when you have a 35-3 lead in the second half, like, yeah, you're going to get a little looser. You're going to just kind of keep things in front of you and say, okay, can you make a 15 play drive to score a touchdown? Because if you can, even if you do, you've burned so much time off the clock that it doesn't really matter anyway. So, there's a lot that goes into it. But, I think talking to him, yeah, you're right. The general tenor of the questioning was, so this probably hasn't been going the way you expected it would, huh? And I think he did a pretty good job of sort of explaining some of the things that have been a little different. He said it's different playing on the outside. Like, you're not in run support the way you are, when you're on the outside instead of the inside, as the slot guy, you're in there in run support a lot, and you're getting caught up in blocks and all that kind of stuff. And when you're on the outside, if you're on the field side, like, that ball's in the air a long time. And that's something you really got to adjust to. Because if you're on if you're the slot corner, it doesn't take that long for, a 20-yard pass to the slot receiver does not take as long as a 20-yard out to the outside to the receiver on the field side, because that ball has to go not just down the field, but across the field too. So, there's been some adjustment for him, but, I think I would be surprised if he was not, did not continue to substantially improve throughout the year, just with the reps based on, this is the first time he's really doing this at the college level, being on the outside. So someone who is as driven as he is and as focused as he is, and with as much on the line this year as he has, he's someone you would expect to see a pretty substantial jump from.
And we've said that about a lot of guys. With more reps, they'll get better. And remember, no spring, crazy summer. And so, issues like this, I guess, shouldn't be a surprise. Look around the nation. Look around the Big Ten. I mean, you could be 0-3. Not that the Buckeyes could, but other teams that had aspirations are 0-3. And it's every win is a good win as long as Ohio State stays undefeated. Guess what, Tom? National champions.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
that's science.
That is science. Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing: there's only 8 games left this year to win the national championship. They have 8 more games to go. They're three down, 8 to go for this year. So it is a different path certainly than a normal year, and you missed a lot of the kind of ramp up time, and you missed your 2 games against the MAC where you can play the backup guys a lot more, and you get your learning done in games where you're winning by 60 points. But they have a couple challenging weeks ahead, and then probably a couple not so challenging weeks, and then all of a sudden it's Michigan week, and then Big Ten championship game week, and then potentially onto the playoff. So getting it's closer than you think.
But it is now Maryland week, Tom, and we will get into the Terps more as we go. We're going to start wrapping up or finish wrapping up. We're going to wrap up. Tom, real quick. I know we'll talk about Maryland later. Over under Maryland points, I'm going to put at 27.5 for you. Where are you going?
Ooh, I was thinking like 24, so I guess I'll go under. But yeah, something in the 20s. I'm going to go over on 19.5 for sure. But yeah, something in the 20s is probably about right. And then I guess the question is, so at what point did they put the backups in? Because they really, really, really want to put the backups in and get the, if it's 35-3 again, not that it probably will be, but if it is 35-3 again at halftime, do they just put the backups in the second half and just kind of let it ride and deal with whatever comes? Or do they, are they prioritizing kind of putting the game away and getting it to 42-3 or something like that before you put the backups in?
Well, and Dave said today they were talking about pulling Fields at the half, but they wanted to go get that one more touchdown out of the third quarter, and it didn't happen. And we know that's kind of the coaching philosophy. Just go get that one more, and either it happens or it don't. So I think the same thing would be the case for this one. I'm not sure Fields doesn't play the entire game. This one, I guess I'm still a little gun shy over the last one. I'm still feeling the effects of the last trip there. That was just a crazy outing, even though that was the rarity. Tom, anything else before we say goodbye?
I think we can probably wrap it up for today. We've plugged this a couple times, but I had Kirk Barton on the morning show on Monday to talk about kind of the technical issues with the offensive line and what he was seeing there. And then Ross Fulton on the Tuesday edition of the morning show talk about kind of the schematic issues they're having in the run game, and also some of the stuff that, what was different in the second half, because Rutgers had 11 yards in the second quarter, and then all of a sudden was moving the ball in the second half. So what was different there? It was, more than just like, well, the backups were in. It was like, well, there's a little more that went into it than that. So those are both worth checking out. You can find the Morning Scoop on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review there, and as well as for Buckeye Weekly. And as I said in the Morning Scoop on Tuesday, we're not just doing these shows to hear ourselves talk. So if there's something you want to hear us talk about on these shows, leave us a 5-star review and then tell us, hey, would love to hear more about, would love to hear you talk more about Michigan, because I think that has been a fun topic for Ohio State fans so far this fall. So if there's that, or on the Morning Scoop, if you want to hear someone else be a regular recurring guest, let me know in the reviews. That's a good way to let us know.
And if you leave a 4-star review along with a request for a topic, we will throw that out or talk about the exact opposite of that topic, just so you know. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you in a couple of days.